The small, dimly lit apartment smelled faintly of damp walls and unfinished meals. It was a place where laughter rarely echoed, where joy seemed like a stranger. In the corner of the cramped living room, Emily, a frail little girl of just 7, sat on the floor clutching her torn teddy bear. Her wide eyes glistened with tears, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Please, don't hurt us." She wasn't speaking to her toy. She was pleading with the man pacing furiously in the room. Robert, her stepfather. His eyes were bloodshot, his fists clenched, and the air was heavy with the stench of alcohol. On the worn-out couch sat Grace, Emily's mother, her face pale, her hands trembling as she tried to shield her daughter with her own fragile body. "Why do you always cry?" Robert snarled, his voice sharp enough to cut through the silence. "Do you think crying will save you? Do you think anyone cares about you too?" Grace shook her head slowly, her lips quivering, but she didn't answer. Emily sobbed harder, burying her face in her mother's lap. The sound of her cries only seemed to fuel Robert's rage. He raised his hand, and Grace instinctively wrapped her arms tighter around Emily, bracing for the blow. But before his hand could fall, a loud knock echoed through the apartment door. It wasn't the knock of a neighbor or a friend. It was firm, commanding like thunder breaking through the night sky. Robert froze, his anger flickering with sudden unease. Grace glanced toward the door, her heart racing. Emily lifted her tear-streaked face, her sobs silenced by fear. The knock came again, louder this time. Robert cursed under his breath and stumbled toward the door. He yanked it open with irritation plastered on his face, only for his expression to falter instantly. Standing in the doorway was a man Robert had only seen in newspapers and on television. His tall frame filled the entrance, his expensive suit, sharp even in the dim hallway light. His presence radiated authority, power, something even more frightening, unshakable certainty. It was Michael Carter Grace's long-lost husband and Emily's real father, a millionaire businessman known across the city for his empire of hotels, investments, and philanthropy. But in that moment, Michael wasn't the polished tycoon people admired in the media. He was a furious father, his jaw tight, his eyes ablaze. With restrained rage, Grace Michael said, his voice deep and steady, though his chest rose and fell with anger. "I came as soon as I heard," Grace gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands. "Michael." It stumbled backward, his arrogance evaporating like mist under the sun. "What are you doing here?" he stammered, suddenly small. In the shadow of the man before him, Michael ignored him completely. His eyes locked onto Emily, who now clutched her teddy bear tighter. For a moment, the sternness in his expression softened. His lips trembled as he whispered Emily. "Little girl." Emily's tears flowed again, but this time, they weren't only of fear. She recognized him not from memory, but from the countless pictures her mother had secretly kept hidden. The father who had disappeared years ago, the man who had left. Without explanation, he was here. Michael stepped inside, and his voice thundered across the small apartment as he turned his gaze back to Robert. "Don't you ever lay a hand on them again." The room shook with his words. For the first time in years, Grace felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Emily clung to her teddy bear, her small chest rising with hope she didn't understand. But beneath the surface of this dramatic entrance lay countless questions. Why had Michael returned now? Why had he left in the first place? And what would happen to Robert, who suddenly seemed desperate to escape the lion's den he had unknowingly walked into? As silence thickened the air, Michael's eyes darted too. Grace, his face hard, yet full of regret. "We have a lot to talk about," he said firmly. The night that had begun with sobs and fear had just taken a turn none of them expected. What Emily thought would be another night of pain had suddenly transformed into the beginning of a storm, just one that would shake their family, expose secrets, and test every bond they thought they had. And yet somewhere deep in her little heart, Emily felt it. For the first time in forever, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The air inside the cramped apartment was suffocating. The walls, stained and cracked, seemed to press in closer as if they themselves were listening. To the storm about to erupt, Robert stood frozen near the couch, his fists clenched at his sides, though his eyes betrayed fear. His arrogance, the swagger he wore so comfortably when tormenting. Grace and Emily had drained from his body the moment Michael Carter stepped inside. Michael's presence filled the room like a roaring fire. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. His calm, sharp tone carried a weight more powerful than any scream. "Robert," Michael said, his voice low and controlled. "You've had your last day of raising your hand against them." Robert swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. I don't know what you're talking about." Grace never said anything. "She's exaggerating. The girl just cries too much." "Stop." Michael's hand slammed against the wooden doorframe with such force that Robert flinched. Emily gasped and buried her face into Grace's lap again. But Michael quickly softened his tone, crouching slightly to glance at his daughter. "It's all right, sweetheart. Daddy's here now." Grace's heart twisted at the word daddy. It had been so long since she'd heard it spoken in this home. Her eyes watered, and for a moment she forgot Robert was even there. But Robert wasn't finished. He straightened his posture, though his knees trembled. "Do you think you can just walk back in here after years of disappearing? You left them. You left her to struggle while you built your empire. And now you suddenly care?" The words struck Grace like knives. She flinched, her lips trembling because part of it was true. Michael had left. He had vanished without explanation, leaving her to raise Emily alone. She wanted answers too, but not like this. Not with Robert spitting venom in her face. Michael turned his gaze to Robert, his jaw tightening. "You're right. I made mistakes. Don't you dare confuse my absence with abandonment. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because someone forced me to." Grace's eyes widened. Her voice cracked. "What are you saying, Michael?" Robert blinked, thrown off balance. "Forced you? By who?" Michael's fists curled at his sides as years of bottled-up pain surfaced. His voice dropped lower, almost trembling with controlled fury. "I had enemies, Grace. Powerful people. People who threatened you and Emily if I stayed close. Every step I took in business, every deal I signed, it painted a target on my family's back. And when the threats became real, I had no choice but to disappear." Grace covered her mouth, her tears falling freely now. Emily peeked up at her father, her innocent eyes brimming with confusion. She didn't understand every word, but she could feel the truth behind them. Robert scoffed bitterly, trying to regain ground. "That's a convenient excuse. You expect us to believe you were some kind of hero in the shadows, that you stayed away to protect them." Michael's eyes narrowed. "Believe what you want, Robert. But the fact remains, you stepped into a role that wasn't yours, and instead of protecting them, you chose to hurt them." Robert's face twisted with anger. "You think you can just take her back? You think you can waltz in here and be the hero now?" Michael didn't blink. He stepped closer, his voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "I don't think. I know, because unlike you, Robert, I don't see them as burdens. I see them as my family. And from this moment on, you will never raise a hand, a word, or even a shadow against them again. Do you understand me?" The room went silent. Even the city noise outside seemed to vanish, leaving only the sound of Emily's small sobs and Grace's shaky breaths. Robert's bravado collapsed entirely. He lowered his eyes, muttering under his breath, "This isn't over." But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. Michael towered over him, his voice cold and final. "Oh yes, Robert, it is." Grace clutched Emily tighter, her heart pounding as relief and confusion battled inside her. For years she had prayed for a savior, someone to break the cycle of fear and suffering. And now, here he was, the man she once loved, the father Emily had never known. But with him came questions, secrets, and a storm of emotions she wasn't ready for. As Robert slinked into the hallway, the silence he left behind was heavier than his presence had ever been. Michael exhaled slowly, then turned back to Grace and Emily. His hardened expression melted as he dropped to his knees and reached out for his daughter. Emily hesitated at first, clutching her teddy bear as if it might shield her. But then, slowly, she stepped into her father's arms. Michael held her close, his chest shaking as he whispered through tears he could no longer hold back. "Sorry, Emily. I should have been here, but I promise you nothing will ever take me away again." Grace's eyes filled with questions, but in that moment she stayed silent. Watching them together, the girl who had suffered so much and the man who had finally returned was a sight she had both dreamed of and feared. Yet deep down, she knew one thing. This was only the beginning. Because with Michael back, old wounds would reopen, secrets would surface, and choices would need to be made that could either heal their broken family or shatter it forever. The night grew heavier, wrapping the small apartment in silence after Robert's departure, but inside, tension still lingered like smoke after a fire. Grace sat on the couch with Emily nestled against her chest, while Michael stood by the window, staring out into the neon-lit streets. Da-da-da-da, his hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of secrets long buried. Grace finally broke the silence. Her voice cracked, a mixture of anger and despair. "You left us, Michael. For years. Do you know how many nights Emily cried herself to sleep? Do you know how many times I sat by the window, praying you'd walk back through that door? And now, you stand here with excuses about enemies?" Michael turned slowly, his face etched with guilt. "Grace, every night I stayed away, I suffered too. Do you think it was easy to miss her first words, her first steps, every birthday? I hated myself, but I had no choice." Emily peeked up at her father, clutching her teddy bear. "Daddy, who were the bad people?" The word daddy stung Michael's heart like both a gift and a punishment. He knelt before his daughter, stroking her hair gently. "People who wanted to hurt me, sweetheart. And when they couldn't, they threatened to hurt you and Mommy instead. I thought staying away would keep you safe."
Nice.
Grace's eyes narrowed, her voice shaking. "Safe? You call this safe? You left me alone to deal with Robert, with the bills, with the shame of explaining why her father wasn't around. Safe, Michael, or convenient?" The words hit him like blows. His jaw tightened, his eyes moistening as he lowered his head. "You're right," he whispered. "I failed you. I failed both of you." Emily, sensing the pain in both her parents, reached out her tiny hands, placing one on each of theirs. Her innocent voice trembled, but carried more weight than either expected. "Don't fight, please. I just want us to be together." The room went quiet again, her words slicing through years of bitterness like sunlight through storm clouds. Michael sighed deeply and rose to his feet. His voice was steadier now, but there was a new urgency in his tone. "You both need to understand. The danger may not be over. The people who forced me to leave, they haven't disappeared. They've only grown stronger. When they find out I'm back, they'll come for us." Grace's stomach dropped. She clutched Emily tighter, fear flashing in her eyes. "What are you saying, Michael? That bringing you back into our lives puts us in even more danger?" Michael walked closer, his expression firm. "No, I'm saying that being apart didn't protect you, it only left you vulnerable. But now that I'm here, I won't run anymore. I'll fight for you. For us. Even if it costs me everything." Grace searched his eyes, torn between the man who had broken her heart and the father who had just promised redemption. She wanted to trust him, but scars of abandonment burned too deeply. Before she could respond, there was a sudden loud crash outside the apartment, car door slamming, heavy footsteps rushing toward the building. The sound jolted all three of them. Emily squealed, burying her face into Grace's shoulder. Michael's eyes narrowed, his instincts sharp, moved quickly to the window and peeked through the blinds. His breath caught. 2 black SUVs were parked across the street, engines idling. Men in dark suits, their faces hard and cold, stepped out. Scanning the building with deliberate precision, Grace's blood turned to ice. Who are they?" Michael's voice dropped, urgent and grim. "Same people I warned you about?" "They've found me," Emily whimpered. "Daddy, are they going to hurt us?" Michael turned back, his eyes blazing with determination. Crouched in front of her, his hands firm on her shoulders. No, sweetheart, I won't let them. But you both need to trust me now more than ever. Grace's heart raced, torn between fear and disbelief. Michael, you can't just bring this chaos into our lives and expect us to blindly follow you. Michael met her gaze, his voice steady and filled with conviction. I'm not asking you to follow me, Grace. I'm asking you too survive with me. Because the storm that started years ago has finally found its way her and running is no longer an option. A heavy knock thundered against the door. Emily screamed. Grace clutched her tighter, her whole body trembling.
Michael straightened.
His jaw tight, his fists clenched. The knock came again, louder. Then a chilling voice called out from the hallway. Michael Carter, we know you're in there. Open the door. You can't hide your family forever. Michael glanced back at Grace and Emily, his face pale but resolute. Stay behind me. Matter what happens? And as the third, deafening knock shook the walls of the apartment, the little family realized their night of reunion was only the beginning of a far greater battle. The third knock thundered like a gunshot through the tiny apartment. Emily clung to her mother, her small body trembling violently. Grace's arms wrapped around her daughter like a shield. Though her own fear was just as raw, Michael stood tall near the door, his fists clenched, his heart racing but his face unshaken. He had lived with fear for years, but this was different. Now fear wasn't just his burden, it threatened his family. He would not let it win. The voice outside came again, sharper this time, with a cruel edge. Michael Carter. We warned you years ago. Step outside quietly or your family pays the price. Grace gasped, her eyes wide. Michael, they know about us. Michael turned quickly, his tone urgent but steady. Grace, listen to me. Take Emily and stay behind the couch. Don't move until I tell you. Grace hesitated, her breath shaking. Michael, what if, please? He cut her off, his voice breaking for the first time. I can't protect you if you're in the open, trust me. With trembling steps, Grace guided Emily behind the couch. The little girl buried her face against her mother's chest, muffling her sobs as Grace whispered, It's okay, baby. Daddy's here now. Michael straightened again and walked toward the door. His shadow stretched across the dimly lit floor, tall and unyielding. He placed his hand on the knob, but didn't open it. Instead, he raised his voice, firm and unwavering. You had your chance years ago. I stayed away. I gave up everything to keep them safe. But now you come here, threatening my family? That was your last mistake. There was silence outside for a moment. Then came a sinister laugh, followed by the sound of a heavy boot slamming against the door. The wood creaked, threatening to splinter. Emily screamed, clutching her mother. Tighter, Grace whispered desperately. Michael, they're going to break it down. Michael's mind raced. He had expected this day, though not so soon. That's why he had come tonight, not just to see Grace and Emily, but to warn them, to protect them. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black device, no bigger than a pager. Pushed a button, and somewhere in the distance, a faint chirp echoed. Grace frowned, confused. What is that? Michael's eyes never left the door. A signal. Backup will be here soon. Backup, Grace whispered, her fear clashing with disbelief. But before she could ask more, the door rattled violently as another kick slammed against it. This time, the wood cracked. A jagged line split down the middle, letting in a thin shaft of hallway light. Stand back, Michael shouted, spreading his arms wide as if he could shield the entire room with his body. The next blow nearly shattered the frame. Grace covered Emily's ears, trying to muffle the terrifying sound. Emily sobbed, her little voice trembling. Daddy, don't let them take us. Michael's eyes hardened, his heart burning with both fear and fury. It turned, his head just enough to meet his daughter's tearful gaze. They won't, Emily. Not while I'm breathing. With a final crash, the door gave way, splintering inward. 3 men in dark suits stormed inside, their faces cold, their movements sharp and calculated. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, sneered. Well, well. The prodigal. Millionaire returns home. Shame you won't live long enough to enjoy it. Michael didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his voice booming in the tiny room. "If you want me, take me, but you don't lay a finger on them." The man with the scar smirked cruelly. "That's the problem, Carter. Hurting them is how we control you." Grace's heart nearly stopped. She clutched Emily tighter, whispering a silent prayer. But before the men could advance, a sudden roar filled the street outside. Engines. Powerful, synchronized engines. Red and blue lights flared through the cracked blinds. Tires screeched. The men froze. Michael's lips curled into the faintest smirk. "You didn't think I'd walk into this unprepared, did you?" Seconds later, the apartment building shook as federal agents in tactical gear stormed the hallway. "FBI, drop your weapons." Chaos erupted. The men spun around, caught off guard as agents flooded the room, pinning them to the ground in seconds. The scar-faced leader resisted, cursing Michael's name. But he was quickly restrained. Grace's mouth fell open, disbelief flooding her eyes. Emily peeked from her mother's arms, whispering, "Mommy, are they gone?" Michael exhaled, finally. Lowering his shoulders, he walked back to his daughter, lifting her gently into his arms. She wrapped her small arms around his neck, refusing to let go. "They're gone, sweetheart, and they'll never hurt you again." Grace's emotions swirled: relief, confusion, anger, hope. She stared at Michael, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew this would happen. You planned this." Michael nodded slowly, holding Emily close. His voice was calm but heavy with meaning. "I didn't just come back to apologize, Grace. I came back to end this. Once and for all." Outside, the night erupted with flashing lights and sirens. The threat that had haunted them for years was finally exposed. But inside that small apartment, different battle was just beginning. The battle to rebuild trust, love, and a family broken by years of silence. And as Grace watched Michael cradle their daughter, she knew the hardest questions had yet to be answered. The flashing lights outside finally began to fade as the agents dragged the intruders away. The sound of sirens grew distant, swallowed by the night. Inside the apartment, silence pressed heavily over them, broken only by Emily's soft sniffles as she clung to Michael's shoulder. Grace sat on the couch, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as she had not spoken a word since. The chaos ended. Her eyes followed Michael's every movement, not with love, not with hate, but with a storm of unanswered questions. Michael gently lowered Emily onto the couch beside her mother. He crouched down, brushing a tear from his daughter's cheek. His voice was soft now, almost fragile. "You're safe, sweetheart. Daddy won't ever let them hurt you again." Emily's tiny voice wavered. "But, Daddy, why weren't you here before? Mommy cried so much when you left." The words pierced Michael's heart deeper than any knife could. He looked into his daughter's wide, tearful eyes, and for the first time, he couldn't hold back the tears brimming in his own. He turned to Grace, his voice trembling. "She deserves the truth. You do too." Grace's gaze was cold, but her voice shook. "Then say it, Michael. Tell us why. Why did you abandon us all those years ago?" Michael drew in a deep breath, then sat heavily on the chair across from them. His eyes lowered for a moment as if searching the floor for courage. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "Grace, I never left because I stopped loving you. I left because I had no choice." Grace's eyes narrowed, bitterness flashing across her face. "No choice? Michael, you walked away from your wife and your little girl. You disappeared without a word. You have any idea what that did to us?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Right." Nodded slowly, the weight of guilt pressing into his chest. "I do, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but please, listen." Emily leaned closer into her mother, wide-eyed, as Michael's story began to unfold. "Years ago, when my business started to grow, I partnered with men who seemed powerful, influential. I thought they could help me build something bigger, something that would give you and Emily the life you deserved. But I didn't know the truth. They weren't businessmen. They were criminals. They laundered money through my companies, threatened me when I tried to pull out." He paused, swallowing hard. His voice cracked as he continued. They told me if I didn't cooperate, they would hurt you, hurt Emily. I begged them to leave you both out of it. But their answer was clear. The only way to protect you was to disappear. So I left. Not because I wanted to, but because I thought keeping my distance would keep you safe. Grace's lips parted, her anger colliding with confusion. So, you vanished? You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth? Michael's eyes filled with shame. I was wrong, Grace. I thought I was protecting you, but I only caused more pain. Every night I imagined Emily growing up without me. Every night I wanted to come home, but I couldn't. Not until I found a way to fight them. His hands shook as he clenched them together. Tonight they came for us anyway. I knew it would happen. That's why I brought the FBI in. I couldn't run anymore. Not from them. Not from you. The room grew heavy with silence. Grace stared at him, her heart torn between the ache of betrayal and the fragile hope in his words. Emily tugged at her mother's sleeve, her small voice breaking the silence. Mommy, Daddy didn't leave because he hated us. He left because he loves us. Grace's eyes welled with tears. She pulled Emily close, but her gaze stayed locked on Michael. Do you have any idea? She whispered hoarsely. How many nights I held our daughter while she cried herself to sleep, asking, for you. Do you know what it's like to explain to a little girl why her father doesn't come home? No. Michael's tears finally broke free, streaming down his face. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his voice pleading. I can't undo the past. Grace, I can't erase the pain I caused you both. But I'm here now. I've ended this threat. I swear on my life, I will never leave you again, not unless you tell me to. Grace shook her head, her emotions torn apart. She had waited years for answers, dreamed of his return, cursed his name and longed for his touch all at once. And now, here he was, broken, remorseful. But still the man she had once loved with all her heart. Emily reached across and touched both of their hands. Her innocent eyes filled with tears. Please, can we be a family again? The simple plea from a child held more weight than any argument. Grace closed her eyes, her tears spilling freely. Michael, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. But for Emily's sake, maybe I can try. Michael's breath caught. Hope flickered in his chest, like the first light of dawn. He reached for Grace's hand, holding it gently as though it might break. Then that's all I need. A chance. For the first time in years, the small apartment felt warmer not because of its walls, but because of the fragile, flickering spark of a family trying to piece itself back together. But deep down, Grace knew one thing for certain. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust could not be rebuilt in a single night. And somewhere out there, shadows still lingered, yet for the first time, she wasn't alone in facing them. The morning sun crept through the cracked blinds, painting golden streaks across the small apartment. For the first time in years, Emily slept peacefully, her head resting on her mother's lap, her little teddy bear clutched in her arms. Grace gently brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Her heart ached with love, fear, and exhaustion. She looked up to see Michael standing by the window, staring at the street below where black SUVs and federal agents still lingered. Making sure the danger was truly gone, he looked different in the daylight, not the untouchable millionaire from magazines, nor the mysterious protector who had stormed into their lives. Oh, but a man stripped bare by love, regret, and determination. Grace finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, but heavy. Michael, you brought chaos into our home last night. You brought danger straight to our doorstep, but you also brought answers. Michael turned, his eyes searching hers. And was it enough? She hesitated, her fingers tightening around Emily's small hand. It was the truth. That's more than I had for years. But truth doesn't erase pain. Michael lowered his head. I know. That's why I don't ask for forgiveness, not yet. It's only for the chance to prove I'm worthy of it. Grace studied him for a long moment. Her anger hadn't vanished, but in its place was something else. A fragile thread of hope she wasn't ready to cut. Before she could answer, a sharp knock echoed again at the door. Grace flinched, pulling Emily closer instinctively. Michael raised his hand. It's okay. This one's different. He opened the door to reveal a tall, serious-looking agent. "Mr. Carter," the agent said, "the men we arrested last night aren't talking, but we intercepted a message. There's one last meeting scheduled with their higher-ups. We need you there to identify them. It's the only way to put an end to this." Grace's face drained of color. "Michael, no, it's too dangerous." Michael stepped closer to her, his voice calm but firm. "Grace, if I don't finish this, they'll always be out there, watching, waiting for you. For Emily, for us. I have to do this." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. She shook her head, whispering, "What if you don't come back?" Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes steady. "Then at least you'll know I gave everything for the two of you. But I promise you, Grace, I will fight like hell to come back, 'cause this time I finally have something worth fighting for." Emily stirred, half asleep, her small voice breaking the tension. "Daddy, where are you going?" Michael knelt down, brushing her hair gently. "Daddy has to finish something important, sweetheart. But I'll be back. And when I do, I'm never leaving again." Emily's sleepy eyes filled with tears. "Promise?" Michael kissed her forehead. "Promise." Hours later, in a dim warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Michael walked in flanked by federal agents. Across the room, the so-called higher-ups sat at a long metal table, their faces calm, arrogant. The scar-faced man from last night was there too, bruised but smirking. "So this is the great Michael Carter," one of them sneered. "The man who thought he could outsmart us." Michael stood tall, his voice echoing through the cavernous room. "I didn't outsmart you. I outlived you, and now it's over." The agents moved in, presenting stacks of evidence and freezing accounts tied to the men. Chaos erupted as they realized their empire had collapsed. Some tried to resist, but armed officers swarmed, ending the confrontation in minutes. When it was done, Michael exhaled deeply. The ghosts of his past had finally been exorcised. He wasn't just free, his family was safe. That evening, Michael returned to the apartment. His suit was wrinkled, his face tired, but his eyes carried something new, peace. Grace opened the door cautiously. The moment she saw him, tears spilled down her cheeks. Emily ran into his arms, her laughter like music after a storm. "You came back!" she shouted, clinging to his neck. Michael held her tightly, whispering, "I told you I would." They stood silently, her heart torn between fear of being hurt again and the undeniable truth before her. Michael had kept his word. He had faced his demons not just for himself, but for them. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Michael, maybe forgiveness doesn't happen in a day. Maybe it takes years. But if you're willing to stay, if you're willing to fight for us every single day, then maybe, just maybe, we can learn how to be a family again." Michael's throat tightened. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "That's all I want, Grace. A chance to rebuild. Brick by brick, day by day." And for the first time in years, Grace didn't pull away. She allowed his hand to stay, together. The three of them stood in that tiny apartment at Millionaire. A broken mother and a little girl who had begged the world not to hurt her. They were far from perfect, far from healed, but they were together, and sometimes that's where healing begins. In life, we often judge people for their choices without knowing the battles they're fighting. Michael's story reminds us that love sometimes means sacrifice, and healing begins with truth, no matter how broken a family may be. With courage, forgiveness, and faith, there's always hope for a new beginning. If this story moved you, subscribe for more emotional and motivational stories every week. Don't miss the next one.